Everyone has said that, which means
We
we're
all
gonna be here at midnight
We
now.
all hope
Great,
so.
thanks. Yeah. All right,
We're good?
anytime you're ready, yep.
All right.
You get the you get the general gist, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
I should not talk. I'm gonna call the meeting to order. Everybody stand for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. The first thing is an announcement to amend the taxation chapter of the village code with respect to the exemption for volunteer firefighters and ambulance workers. And that public hearing is going to be Monday, March 18th, 2024 at 7 p.m. in Village Hall. Larry, do you need to sit? You want to give
Just a
more color on that? I know
Sure.
the statutes there, but
Yeah, well, the state passed an entirely new section of legislation to cover firefighter and ambulance worker exemptions. So we're required to, if we're going to continue to offer that exemption, which we had been all along, we need to adopt a revised provision. For the most part, the provision's the same, but there are a few subtleties that we'll go through at the public hearing and are outlined in the law. But it's basically, it's a 10% property tax exemption, which is what's been offered.
okay. Next up is correspondence. I just want to say something about correspondence for the general audience, perhaps not the people who are here, but people who are listening. It's been suggested sometimes I give short shrift to some of the letters. Two things about that. One, whether or not we read it publicly, it's on the record. And two, what's really important is whether or not the people up here, and there's a few board members participating remotely, read those letters. And I can assure you that there isn't a letter that the board gets that I don't read. Having said that, I will try to be a little less, I will try to give a little more detail on some of the letters that we are dealing with. Okay, first one is a letter from Tom, I'm probably going to mispronounce this, but Surace.
Surace, yeah.
I guess he talked to you, Larry. They're green industry professionals licensed in Westchester County. They have questions about, I guess we could describe this one as the gas-powered leaf blower statute as it applies to the operation of the liquid fuel-powered equipment for the purpose of spraying trees and turf. They give a little bit more information on that, but executing effective controls in large ornamental plantings would be compromised based on restrictions in operating liquid fuel-powered spraying equipment. And they note the spotted lanternfly as a problem. And so they'd like a compromise or an opportunity to revisit the ordinance. And he notes that he's met with board members in the past and coordinated events in Rockland County. What I'm going to suggest on this one, I wouldn't mind meeting him even if it's a Zoom. I will tell you from personal experience, this may be something we have to look at. Not that I matter that much, but I have one of the few remaining large copper beaches. I mean, it's got to be 120 years old, and it is going to suffer the same blight that they are dealing with in the Irvington Woods, which are these nematodes that attack it. And when they are treating it, they come with a truck to spray it. And if that counts, which I think it does on a literal reading of the legislation, and they're not spraying toxic sprays, I have enough health issues without that. So this is one that I think we should look at maybe at an upcoming work session, but I wouldn't mind talking to him about it if we could arrange that. And I'm not trying to reopen this because I know how much went into it, but to the extent there are problems in the implementation, I don't mind taking a look at it. Okay, next up, a letter from Connie Kehoe that I should read word for word only because it has some nice things to say about the board, but I will summarize it like I have the others. It's to me and to the trustees. I'd like to express my gratitude to the current members of the board for the ongoing work we do day to day. Having served for 12 years on the board, she realizes in many ways the board serves a community that the public may not be aware of. Additional exec sessions, review of proposals, liaison commitments, research of complex issues, all require time and thoughtfulness. Perhaps it's human nature, but in general, the policies and programs of local government that community members are pleased with often go unnoticed. Issues that arouse concern are often fully expressed, and this can lead to a careful additional review of issues. In addition, in the best case scenario, looking anew at an issue and appreciation builds for the complexity of it and the thoughtful effort and research already invested. Anyway, thank you, Connie. I appreciate it, and I happen to agree with you. There's a lot goes on, and not just for the board, but for the village staff. A lot of things that they do that people don't actually see. So I might suggest to people, if you see somebody out there working and they're doing a good job, say thank you. Okay, next up, a letter from Rona Horwitz Baird, sorry, I'm gonna do it again. Okay, I got it right the first time. We're writing to oppose the plan put forth by the Irvington Woods Committee to hire a hunter to kill deer in the woods. We recognize the legitimate problem identified by the committee. The existence of the problem doesn't automatically justify any solution, especially a problematic one involving bow hunting. First, it's immoral and barbaric, and particularly problematic to do so with taxpayer money. Second, the idea is to save the woods, but this proposed solution turns the woods into a hunting ground that would not be hospitable to visitors. They talk about, what parent would want to take young children into the woods knowing a child might hear the screams of a dying deer or see the body hauled out of the park. The hunter claims no one will be in danger, but how can one really feel safe in the woods knowing there's a hunter who's actively hunting? Third, the proposed killing of the deer is not even sure to solve the problem. Deer don't know village borders. There's nothing keeping other deer from filling the void. In fact, and again, I'm quoting the letter, the hunter the committee wants to hire admitted in his testimony to the village board, neighboring deer will come into the woods to replace the ones that are killed. The committee is coming up with studies to support effectiveness of killing deer. What is clear is that we don't know if killing deer will have the desired effect. If we're going to take an extreme action like this, the effectiveness of the plan should be far more sure than it is. Is this the kind of village we want to be? We applaud the work the committee has done in identifying the problems in the woods. We wish the committee would recognize how problematic this proposed solution is and continue to explore other options. Should be noted that while Hastings, Dobbs Ferry, and Terrytown all have wooded areas and face the same problem we do from the deer who graze in their woods, only Irvington is considering killing the deer. Hastings attempted to use fencing, and sort of a comparison is drawn. If killing the deer is such a surefire, effective solution, and there's no moral problem with killing the deer, why aren't these other villages doing the same? The reluctance of our neighbors to join in killing the deer should give us pause. We urge the board to take the problem seriously and explore possible ways to improve the situation in the Irvington woods, but do not support bow hunting as a viable or morally defensible solutions. Other solutions, including fencing, should be explored. I just want to note that this letter was resubmitted, and we will not read it again next week, but it had a total of, I think, 27 people who had signed on, including what came in the second letter. And just so that let's see if I have the letters. Yes. The letters in the prior week that I think were referenced as not being fully presented were from Michael Motion and let's see, Todd Wilson, and they gave the opposite position, which is they're concerned with the woods and the deer population, and they understand the Irvington Woods Committee has spent 2 years with various state agencies and qualified partners assessing the health and overpopulation of deer is decimating our ecosystem. The person described how they take hikes and the deer are making regeneration impossible, so they support reducing the deer population. And the other letter was, I write in support of the Woods Committee recommendations to control deer population, including professional bow hunting. While deer are native and majestic, there's too many for our ecosystem to support. I'd also encourage a conversation with decision makers at Columbia University about their property, which is similarly overpopulated. To all of these things, I just want to let people know that we are going to schedule a hearing for people to present their views. It will not be a hearing at which the board makes a decision. It will just be an opportunity for them to speak to whatever their position is, and we will listen. So the announcement about that will be upcoming. All right, what am I missing? Michael, Hannah, this was a note. Michael's under the impression that the future of Rocktoberfest was in doubt, that and was concerned that it was going to be summarily canceled. And as a community member and former member of FACE, he suggests there should be more events at Scenic Hudson and Matheson Parks because they help bring people together, and some can be used for fundraising. The group could not only organize some events, could also facilitate, support other local groups to hold events such as the Juneteenth Committee, or help rec for July 4th, and even potentially encourage regional groups to sponsor events. To this particular point, we responded that I don't think the board was looking to cancel Rocktoberfest, but what we did say, and we have set up, in fact, I think it's tomorrow, a Zoom session with the members of the FACE committee to discuss this point, because my particular concern is that we have a new leader, new superintendent of the rec department. They are down a person, and this is a pretty labor-intensive activity. And in our capital budget, we are going to be looking at building a stage in Matheson Park, which perhaps we may want rec to be focusing on how to arrange a whole host of events rather than focusing all their energy on one particular event. Having said that, the way it was presented to the FACE committees, if they can take the laboring oar, then it's something we can do. But if they are expecting the rec department to lead the process, that may be more difficult. So we'll have a conversation about that tomorrow. And I think Michael understood that. Okay, public comment. Does anybody have anything they want to say at this point? Okay, save it all to the end. Okay, consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of the village board from the regular meeting on February 28, 2024? All right, I'll make the motion. Anybody want to second it? Second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Actually, where's the camera's back there? I should be pointing that way. All right, continuing public hearing to consider the local law amending the village code to limit the ARB review of solar panels, developments requiring HOA approval, and the rears of structures. So I'm going to spend 2 minutes giving what is my understanding of this statute, of this proposed regulation, so that, Mary Ann, you can correct me if I get it wrong. So basically what we've done here is we've said that in the description of applications to require ARB review, we have said that the erection of signs and solar energy it's not erections, it's just solar energy equipment in the historic overlay district. The way the language is drafted, what it does is it takes out solar energy equipment not in the historic district from the required ARB approval. Those solar installations are still subject to the guidelines that the board adopted previously that include limitations on that require that the solar installation be parallel to the roof, within a certain height, within a certain framework. If it's a flat roof, I think it can't be closer than 4 inches to the edge. So there are rules that would govern the ability of would enable the building inspector to assess the appropriateness of that, and in fact, the building inspector probably does that now. Other applications that were carved out from ARB review are reconstruction or alteration of any dwelling unit in a community that requires HOA approval for exterior changes. So if you have a development, if you will, that has a governing body that requires the approval for any exterior changes, we are deferring to that governing body instead of the ARB. In that case, I assume they are also limited by the approval plan that if to the extent it applied, by the approval plan that they received originally. Would that be a correct statement?
I assume you mean the approval from the planning board.
Correct, I'm sorry.
Yeah, they
Okay.
can't vary there.
Okay, and then the other exception to ARB review would be reconstruction or alteration in the rear of any building not located in the historic overlay district. And it cannot be any portion of the building facing a street or a public park. And I think the thinking on that is that it's not part of the character of a neighborhood. The ARB is assigned with the task of making sure that changes to buildings or other aspects of that are consistent with the character of the neighborhood. And the way this is drafted, it makes sure that it is not public facing. It is behind the building, specifically not facing a street or a public park. And then it goes on to require notice for any solar energy equipment in the historic overlay district, and references that solar energy equipment has to meet all that they've taken all reasonable options to achieve compliance with the solar energy guidelines adopted by the Board of Trustees.
And that had to be put in there because it's no longer before it was the ARB that applied those standards. And now since they're not, they had to be put somewhere.
So,
John, if I could just
yes,
say.
please.
Just one,
Yeah.
everything you said is right, but I just wanted to point out a change over the draft that you had at the last meeting. At the last meeting, it said that you didn't need ARB approval for reconstruction or alteration of any building in a community that requires HOA approval. And I think it was Randy Huff raised the point that sometimes you might not want them to be able to change the clubhouse or a gatehouse or something. So it was, the building was changed to
dwelling unit, got it,
So
okay.
that's a change over
Thank
the
you.
draft at
Thank
the
you,
last
thank you.
meeting.
Thank you, Brenda. I was gonna ask to make sure that was the change.
Yeah, it's.
So I will say this, having taken an informal poll of the board, we are inclined to adopt the law the way I just described it. Of course, we're going to hear this is a public hearing, so I want to hear his comments, because there is a desire to make sure that we are promoting, at least to just address the solar energy equipment, promoting the installation of solar energy equipment. I'm going to overstate this, and I admit it's hyperbole, but it won't matter how many historic buildings we have if we haven't got a sustainable planet, and if we are dealing with the kind of, and we're seeing it at least with the flooding, the kind of weather changes that we're seeing now. Again, that's not a knock on historic buildings. I happen to live in one that's pretty old. I understand from our last conversation, Randy, that there's a difference between I'll call it a significant historic building and just an old building, but I have an affection for my old house. So I don't know if anybody else on the board wants to say something, but if not, I'm open to have people comment.
I just want to add that I'm most interested in hearing comments about B2, because I want to learn more about that. And
Which is the construction in the rear of the
Yeah,
building.
yeah.
Okay. Anybody want to say anything? Sure.
Randy Huff. So, yeah, the rear of the building, I think, is the main focus of my comments at this point. I think the HOA is a good change. For the rear of the building, I still feel strongly we should make an exception for the historically important structures. What happens in the rear of a building could be, taking down the entire rear and putting up vinyl windows on a very old house or changing the architecture significantly. Regardless, I mean, that it's allowed, you can propose that, but right now it goes through design review. And I think that design review should remain in place for these few historic structures.
No, I understand your concern. One question I had was, again, going back, there was that letter, I know it wasn't yours, it was on its own, but, oh, yeah,
Paul.
there, yeah, Paul,
Yeah.
thank you, yeah. But there were a lot of them on that list. If the owner of that building doesn't agree, it's still, they would be subject to this law, right? In other words.
Yes, I don't know if Marianne had a chance to look it up, but I mean, legally, we have the right
Yeah,
to,
there's no question, and
Yeah.
the board recognizes that he has the right. And I guess it was about 10 years ago, the board talked about it, and decided not to regulate beyond the historic district, not to have any special limitations beyond the historic district.
Right.
So, yeah, I'm entirely familiar with that.
yeah, it didn't seem clear like in the last meeting, but.
Yeah, I always know.
Um,
I mean, not when I was a little kid, but I've known it in recent years, yes.
So what we're doing here with this law is we're lifting existing restrictions. So that's the issue I have, that I would like those to remain in place.
So if somebody wanted to do work on the back of their dwelling, it would still go through the planning board, but the planning board is in charge of looking at the architecture. You're saying someone should be looking at the architecture on these buildings.
Well, take the example of no planning, like it's just like windows, or they're not expanding the footprint, but they're changing the back of the house. That would skip planning and go straight to A or B.
But if it was at all visible from the front, then it would go to the architectural review board, right?
From the front, yes.
Yeah,
But we have buildings on private land where there is, like the old Dill House. What is the front? It's on private land. You can't see it from any road.
Gotcha.
Can I ask you a question? Are there any other restrictions in place, like the properties, for example, listed on the New York State and National Register of Historic Places? I guess, like, are there any other protections in place by virtue of being on that list?
No, being on a register doesn't provide any protections. It's local laws that provide the protection. So when we instituted the historic district here, that did not put any enforcement in place. It's all local laws.
Wasn't there, in dealing, or I guess there aren't that many properties that this applies to, but in dealing with Madam Walker's house and the Octagon House, they have given over the rights that they have to follow certain rules, correct?
By I think they're both federal landmarks, by
Right, that's
the
what I mean,
landmark
yeah.
commission.
But
yes.
obviously, none of the properties on the list we were provided are subject to those same regulations.
Well, a
as
few,
the-
on the list you got, some of those were, the list included formally designated buildings and eligible buildings, and then buildings that the historic district, when that was the historic district, whatever committee determined were significant.
So the ones that have the federal protection, they couldn't put the vinyl windows on the back regardless, because they would be violating their agreement with the.
They would be, yeah, assuming that there's, anybody's paying attention,
Right,
but yeah.
right.
Okay.
Does anybody else wanna? I think somebody beat you to it, but you're next, how's that?
Oh, go ahead, Earl.
Oh,
It's
all right.
right.
Well, you're already up, you might,
All right.
you're both gonna get to talk, so either way, okay. Ladies.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
I'm Leola from North Continent Street, Leola Specht. And I would like to our wonderful mayor, trustees, administration, and community to kind of, I'm advocating for making solar easier in our community. And I'll tell you why. In Scarsdale, I think it was more than 5 years ago, about 20 high school students came in and said, stop denying solar for aesthetic reasons. We see them as beautiful. This is our future. We need this. We cannot keep polluting just because it doesn't look good, because actually the young people think it looks beautiful. And so we need to change our thinking on this. I have a home in the historic district, and within prescribed guidelines for solar siting, because I'm not going to put up on my 0.10 of an acre thing on the front lawn, none of that. We have already laws about that, but we need to not deny it because it's on my front roof. I'm not even a candidate for a front roof, but we need to make it as easy as we can to implement solar, not in the woods, not where you're taking down nature, but on structures. It makes perfect sense that we should have a very easy way for our community to add solar to their homes, for our businesses, no matter what the district is. So I almost think this is not even, enough, but I do commend you for trying to make it easier to get solar on people's homes. The other that I would also like to ask you to consider is waiving permitting fees for energy efficiency improvements, things like geothermal, heat pumps, solar, the kinds of things that'll take us to the future that we need. Westchester gets an F for air quality every year. Our leaf blower ban will help. We've got to stop burning oil and gas. We need to help people be more eco-friendly. And when there are municipal burdens that prevent them from doing that, we're not going to meet our deadlines for emission reductions, and we're really all going to be in trouble. So thank you for this work. Keep going.
Just so you know, I'm meeting with Charlotte on Friday just to talk about the unified permit for solar. So we'll see if that we can do something that will help in the process.
Okay.
Hi again, it's Earl Ferguson. I have nothing against solar. As a matter of fact, I'm a great proponent of it. So I really don't think that there should be a conflict between historic preservation and implementation of solar energy. They're not mutually exclusive. I wonder if the current guidelines, the solar installation guidelines, are appropriate. Does the board feel that they are appropriate for historic buildings that have been listed on the National Register or the State Register, or those that are listed as eligible as local landmarks? And would only ask for you to maybe look back into that and see if there are certain changes that could be made in those standards that would be more appropriate for those buildings that are so recognized. I wanted to just clarify something. My understanding of the National Register is that there is no protection. Being listed on the National Register brings no limitations to what an owner can do with one's property. As a matter of fact, right now, someone could come along and make an application for a demolition permit, say for Nevis, and Nevis could go ahead and demolish the building. There may be a way, if we kept design review in place, some kind of design review in place, similar to the way it is with the historic district, that any application for demolition would most likely be connected with some kind of plan going forward. Usually it's related to a development. So the historic building is in the way of a development. And so that would ordinarily go through planning board review, and not, if these changes in ARB or design review are implemented, there will be no design review. In the historic district, you can't demolish a building even up to a certain percentage, I believe, Mary Ann, right?
Yeah.
Without ARB review.
Right.
Because
Demolish is
what it
defined
does.
very broadly as essentially doing anything to the front of the building and then a
Yeah.
percentage of other sides of the building.
Yes, because as I think Randy pointed out before, a building isn't just viewed from, it's not just a facade, it can be viewed in 3 dimensions. You can drive down the street, you see it from the side. If you look, you see it from the front. If you look back, you see it from the other side. Also, the potential impact to neighborhoods. What would such development or alterations to a building, how that might affect the neighboring properties and the value of those neighboring properties. I just wanted to make those comments, and thank you for your efforts. Thank you.
John, can I ask Earl a question?
Sure.
Because Earl, you probably understand this better than I do, but I thought on the historic buildings, to get designated, like Bill and we, and you had to enter into this easement and you couldn't make changes without the approval of the landmark.
The national nor the state regulate these buildings.
Okay, I misunderstood that.
It's only our local laws that offer even a modicum of protection for
Well,
historic
one-
buildings.
I think there's, it's associated with the National Trust, but I'm not sure if that's.
Oh, maybe.
National
yeah.
Trust and National Register are different
Okay,
entities.
It was something, because
Okay,
when Bill and
I'm
Laurel
thinking
came
of the
for their
National
permit,
Trust.
it came up in that discussion of the permit that they
Yes.
couldn't do certain things to their building because they had
Right,
granted
and it was the
easements.
same
I
thing,
didn't remember the name of
Same.
the,
same thing with Bill and we. I also
And
think that's
Octagon.
true of Octagon.
it is, because it came up with a permit, unless I misremember, yeah,
Right.
because they have the same special use permit, right?
I think those are special conditions, yes.
Yeah.
And the Octagon House as well, I believe, yeah. Thank
But
you.
if you wanted to, that
Yeah.
it would be an easy change. I mean, you couldn't vote on it tonight. But to say that in the historic overlay district and on any historically designated, any building designated by.
You gotta pick who, yeah.
Well,
Pick your
well,
authority.
it could be
That's where
a
it starts
formal
getting dicey, though,
designation.
Yeah.
Well, it could be the formal designation right now. We know we've got about 6 of them. in
I would be okay with that. I don't want to speak for anybody else, but
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, especially, I mean, especially for the rear of the house, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not as big a deal for the HOA or the solar, but I think that makes a lot of sense.
right, we're talking about B2, which is the reconstruction or alteration of the rear of any building not in historic overlay district. And that might have been designated, and you'll have to give me the
Well, you
language,
could
but-
say the property's listed on the New York State National Register of Historic Places. And that's the Octagon House, the the school and the town hall. The Lord and Burnham Building, McVicker House, Ville and Wee, St. Barnabas Church, Villa, the Washington Irvington Monument, the Irvington Historic District, yes, sorry. You
Okay.
could add properties listed on the New York State National Register.
How many of those on that list?
Well, the schools, I don't know, it's a little hard to
Yeah.
count, because the school's on and the school could do it,
Right,
same with the
yeah.
town hall. But excluding the school and the town hall, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 buildings in the, that's what I was right,
And these
6.
they're on the state registry?
Either the state or national register
State or national registry?
of historic places.
And that wouldn't automatically apply to all contributing buildings in the historic district, would that?
No,
No,
how do we
But they're
have
including
this?
them separately. Yeah.
Yeah, we have.
Okay.
No, this isn't limited to the contributing buildings in the historic district, it's
Entire-
anywhere in
it's
the
any
historic district.
Yeah,
It could, because it could have, if it's in the historic district and then it's next door to what, even if it's not a contributing building, it's probably next door to a contributing building, because most of them
I
are.
don't think anyone's asked, and thinking of lifting the historic overlay.
No, I'm just responding,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So,
Okay, so if you want to try to, you can put something together and,
Wait, but to be clear, that's only for the backs of the buildings, not for the solar, right?
correct, B2.
oh, you don't wanna do that for the solar
I would
too?
not be in favor for the solar. I feel very strongly about that.
And I think that's, I don't want to misquote anybody, but I think that was generally the gist of the objection that was raised here.
Okay, okay.
I am,
just for the rear buildings.
yeah, because what
okay.
I'm struggling with is, I think Randy makes a really good point about the historic buildings and even if it's the back, it could have an effect. I'm also I don't want the board to become like a historic sanctioning body, picking and choosing, but something that's so specific, like the state and the federal registers are are something that I feel comfortable with as a way of identifying things. So I'm trying to balance those two, for me, compelling arguments. But it's not compelling to me for the solar. I think the solar needs to be, I'm more in what Viola was saying, I think we need to have solar, make it as easy as possible for people to have solar.
So, what do I, does anybody have a different, did you want to, oh, I got two, okay. All right, it's still public comment, come on, somebody come up.
I'm only coming up because it's
Okay.
it's relevant to
No,
what
no, absolutely.
Mary Ann just
I
said.
understand, I'm not objecting. This is your time.
Well, you know,
Yeah.
you get maybe one or two shots at this. Anyway, thank you for considering the designated buildings. However, I just want to also mention that some of the buildings that are listed on the inventory that the Historical Society Preservation Committee put together, and again, that's based on, 50 years of information that comes from other dedicated people. And with the cooperation of many village elected leaders, I must say. There are a few buildings also that are recognized by the State Historic Preservation Office as eligible for listing on the on the National Register. We wouldn't want to foreclose on those that have been recognized as eligible by excluding them from the same consideration that you are giving those that are
And there is
already
some
listed.
state list that reflects that somewhere?
It's been included and broken out in
No,
that
understood.
inventory.
But I can't just,
Isn't that only the Odell Tavern?
No, the Odell Tavern, surely. And then there's properties listed by the Westchester County Inventory of Eligible Landmarks. There are two of those that are not in the historic district on that list. And then the others are the ones that are considered eligible by the Historical Society Preservation Committee.
So the difference between the properties that are eligible for the National Registry and the ones that are on the National Registry is that the owners of the properties that are eligible have not agreed to let it go on the National Registry, or is it something else?
Either haven't agreed or haven't been approached. There's been no nominations.
but
So
so,
what side they're
The
eligible?
Odell Tavern is a little bit different because that was received by the State Historic Preservation Office as a nomination for National Register. It just wasn't followed through with. There was a change of ownership and so forth.
I guess on that, I just ask, I
Yeah.
want to make sure I understand this.
Yeah.
So if something is designated, who decides that it's eligible, I guess is what I'm saying? If the National Register agrees to list it, we know it's the National Register, but who decides that it's eligible for the?
Well, it goes through the State Preservation Office first. That's like a gateway or a gatekeeper who works with the works with the preservation committees and then decides based on the information gathered or based on an official nomination. They then decide whether it is eligible for nomination on the National Register. So the state sends it to the National Register to the Secretary of State, Parks and Recreation.
So you're saying, I'm sorry. to interrupt,
That's
I'm
just a
trying to get to that.
process.
So in
No, I
order to
understand.
be eligible for the federal means the state has to have acted and said, we agree, this is eligible.
There may be some exceptions to that, but it's ordinarily, that's the process it goes through. The state works with municipalities for historic districts, and then they work with nominating committees or owners for individual property designation.
But could you be eligible for the National Register without having been approved by the state to be eligible for the National Register?
In my opinion, you could, and in Westchester County's opinion as well. They did an inventory because, they like to understand what some of these, precious historic places are and advocate for their preservation.
Thank you for all the information. I'm sorry. I
You're
have
welcome.
questions. I'm just trying to wrap my head around how we can.
No,
find some objective
it's
standards to
it's
apply
very,
to,
it's very complicated.
And the way you've expressed it, it literally means there could be historic buildings out there that haven't been identified and haven't been
Designated.
designated as even eligible,
There could be, there are many.
which means it's a somewhat, it's not arbitrary, but the result is arbitrary.
That would need to be determined. As a matter of fact, we've received one request from an owner of a building who said, well, my building showed up on one of the very early lists, some 50 years ago. How come it's not on your list? And we just didn't, it was an error that we made. We didn't add it to the list. But it will get added to the list for all the good it might do.
Got it.
Thank you.
Anything you want to add? Okay. Anybody that way?
You have Dave.
Oh, yes. Go ahead, David, did you want to say something?
Oh dear. David Zweibel.
I don't like that delivery. But go ahead.
I want to say I really appreciate the energy you are putting into this, and I understand that. Having said that, I feel, and I'm taking a little bit of umbrage at the suggestion that 50 years of various professionals in Irvington who have created a listing of properties that are perhaps the basis of the land values of the rest of the properties in town.
Can I say one thing so you don't take umbrage? You would not like it if in another context I said, the people that live on Cottonette get to decide what happens to the people who live on Ecker, what happens to their homes. What you've just described is a circumstance where you are right, there are local experts, and perhaps as a local expert, you're taking offense that we're even challenging that. But the truth is, what I am trying to find is an external body that is unambiguous in its designation. I can't use your word, I can't use Earl's word, I can't use the Historical Society's word, because would you like me to put that in the statute? Somebody find Earl, somebody find David, and ask them if this is one of those buildings. So help me to do what we're trying to do here. Don't take umbrage at that. Assume that what I'm trying to do is create good law that's gonna work. Actually, you can take
You're
umbrage.
misinterpreting what I'm taking
All right,
umbrage at.
sorry, and by the way,
I'm not taking umbrage at that.
Well, that's fine. Oh, all right.
At
Give me the other one.
that particular point. And I would strongly suggest, I don't want Earl deciding about my property or anybody else's property.
I understood.
Uh,
And I was, no
the,
offense intended, I was just using you because you're both here.
We're not talking about opinions.
Okay.
We're talking about research that have been done, and historically significant properties like the Old Elk Tavern. It's not that it just happens to be an old building, it happens to be the place where George Washington did whatever he did, or Benjamin Franklin. I forget the history myself. Names and dates don't stick well with me. But the fact that even getting to the National Historic Register, it doesn't go top down. It goes bottom up. And it's not getting on the historical register at all, probably, if 30 or 40 or 20 years ago, there wasn't somebody in the Irvington Historical Society that made a list and said, these buildings are this way because Tom Smith slept here and John Doe Jones did that, and a fire happened here and the slave trade went this way. And it happens to be the original building that has not been severely had the entire rear of it ripped off and turned into a, whatever. And these buildings are the character of this town. And I do want the building department to tell me, no, you can't do that because on this property, because that's going to affect the neighbors and it's going to affect the land values of the rest of the people in town.
So we're in violent agreement when it comes to the National Register and the State Register. Tell me how to find the other 6 buildings on something that is independent of the Irvington Historical Society. It doesn't matter whether they're all experts or the experts contributed to that. What happens when next year they change the list?
What I'm taking umbrage at specifically
Yeah.
is that you are suggesting that 50 years of looking and identifying these buildings is going to, the protections that we have now are going to be removed from them. So you are essentially removing protections from 50 years worth of designating things that contribute to the character of the town. So it's the removal of the existing protections that I'm taking umbrage at, not necessarily asking you to, put more weight
Okay,
on
but if I
property
want you to
values.
do what you want, you still have to answer my question, which is how do I find an independent list that identifies those buildings?
Okay,
You want me to
we'll
throw-
come to us and we'll give you a solution to that. We
I'm
will-
asking you to do it now, so
Well-
that Mary Ann can draft it for the next meeting.
The-
And if you can't, I understand, but
No, the way to do that would be to find experts and get their opinions.
I can't do that. I cannot do. I need, even if it is.
Well, you
I've asked her
you
for
write
permission.
rules.
Eligible for, and maybe this was a question Mary Ann asked before, eligible for a state list, a register, or the national register, means something has been done, or it's just the nature of the building that it's old enough, it's got some attribute that could have put it on, but it wasn't put on.
Yeah, yes,
Sorry,
It's easy.
Yeah.
All of that,
And I wanted to say- I'm sorry, go ahead.
we had, yeah.
Don't go away.
Because I wanted to talk to David, so.
Yeah.
Mary Ann can probably answer this much better than I can. I'm not an attorney, but there's been plenty of legal description as to what represents.
It's a formal
what-
designation, right? Isn't eligible to be on the thing of
Yes,
formal
but we
designation?
wrote a local landmark law also, the
Yeah.
local landmark law. And even that picked up the standards that the national or the state would have used as to what are the criteria that one needs to use in order to
Yeah,
determine
but
that a building is
I
eligible.
think what John's getting at is, if you say eligible and it's eligible with a small e,
Yeah.
and you don't know whether your building's eligible or not, or is eligible have a capital E as a
Right.
formal
How do I
That's what I was
designation?
getting at with
Yeah.
my questions.
Yeah.
Well, if
I'm not
if it meets the criteria that is
Yeah.
laid out in the law.
But that would mean if, I don't know if my house is you know what I mean? I would not know where I have to go for the application. That's why it doesn't work. I need something a little more formal than that defines on or off.
Mhm.
And I know it's been suggested we should just take this list and adopt it, but it doesn't.
Just by the way, there's only one building on the list that's listed as eligible, Necio Del, on this
Okay.
list, Necio Del Tapper.
But the Westchester
Well, then,
inventory
we're not, yeah,
considers
there's a
it.
Westchester inventory is different.
So, David, you took umbrage, and I don't want you to feel umbraged. As someone who teaches copy editing, it hurt me to say that, but, and I want to explain, because I think there's a lawyer to human barrier that we have not crossed well.
Yes.
So let me try and explain that. I used to be a legal editor, and I'm
Go
supposed
ahead.
to be good at this, and we'll see if I actually am. When a governmental entity, right, designates law, right, it is not a good idea to export that lawmaking to a private organization, right? You like to, and you make a law to make it clear to everybody, right? Laws have to be clear. There's due process problems if we don't have clarity. That whether it's the Congress or the tiny little Irvington board, we have to have some kind of identifiable standard that everyone understands, that's made not by people who, because people have opinions, but rather are by institutions, right? So like you can say, you know, if somebody is like designated by the American Red Cross at this level of whatever, they can, their driver's license can be that, right? You can make these kind of standards. I'm an academic. I respect the 50 years of that more than you know. But the question is, from a legal legislative point of view, how do you say, well, this private group says that they are, so we're going to legislate that? What John was trying to say is there something more standardized?
The criteria.
I would just suggest that perhaps what might help, and what will answer it much better than I can, is to take a review of the Village of Irvington's local landmark law. That will actually, explain it much better.
No, the problem with that is it gives standards, and the board is talking about, they don't want to have a review and see whether it meets these standards. They just want it to be on some formal list somewhere, like the formal, national designation.
So
Plus the
every
local
property owner
landmark.
in Irvington will know where he or she or they stand. That's what I'm trying to say. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
You can't use the local landmarks law because that's completely
Right.
voluntary, so
There you go.
I'm not sure
And
that's where you want to go.
you said Westchester County has its own list? And that picks up Odell?
I don't know.
that's-
The only two they have on here are, Habermeyer Sturgis House, which is 9 Hancock Place, and the Lindens at 54 Jaffray Court. I don't know whether the Westchester County inventory also includes the stuff above it, you know what I mean?
You mean
Includes
whether
Odell
they
and-
say that it's eligible or
Yeah,
not
yeah.
eligible?
I mean, since this is for the purpose of determining whether or not ARB reviews the rear of the building, if Westchester actually maintains a list that we can look at and somebody who owns the home can look at, I would be willing to do that. I'm not trying to take a shortcut. I'm trying to make a law that functions. And Mitch is helpfully translated from me to other humans.
I don't know how well he did.
And I'm with you, and
Okay.
I think that in order to get on Westchester's list, you have to have met certain criteria. And some individual went through that criteria and judged it and put it on the list. And that's all I'm suggesting, is that we don't remove our current review.
I mean, I don't think, I guess I don't think that we're trying to take out a whole bunch of review from the process, right? Like, I don't, and it doesn't even seem like we're talking about a lot of houses,
We're not.
right? We're not talking about like 500 houses
No.
off some list,
No,
or it
exactly.
seems like a handful of houses that we're talking about, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, and the only reason
It
we
sounds
are
like
talking about that
three.
handful is
Okay.
because a number of them have been torn down. in
Three,
the past.
okay, Mary, we're talking about three. So I think what we're saying, and maybe I'm not helping either because I'm also a lawyer, but I think all we're saying is we want this to be clear for the homeowners too, right? You want it to be so that someone is like, okay, I need to go to the ARB because I'm on this list, or I don't, not, oh, it's not so clear for me, right? That's, and I think we have to figure out what that is.
Marianne, are you familiar with the Westchester list? Because if
No,
not,
I'm
Can you
trying to
gu-
find it now.
can one of you guys, you don't have to do it immediately, but
maybe-
send us.
Let me just say, I'm sorry,
Yeah, go ahead.
let me just say that they no longer keep a list. I think they did it up until, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, Marianne, and then they
What are you talking about,
they
Westchester
stopped
County?
doing
I
it.
don't know, I'm
Yeah.
looking now.
It's through the planning, it was through the Planning Commission.
Is there at
It
least
would-
a
The
historical list
Westchester
that we could
Historical
use?
Society, through the Westchester Planning Commission, I believe, is the
I
link.
think in terms of due process, it has to be something like, just if you are going to buy a house in Irvington and there is an easement right through it for something that the village needs, when you get your title insurance and they do a search, that will come up and people could say, hey, you're buying this house, just know that there's this easement subject to it. You can say yes or no. And I think that's what we're trying to get at. What is the thing that a that someone buying a property could look at and say, oh, this is on that list, I wouldn't be able to do these things. I think that's kind of what we're driving at, rather than in no way belittling the work of 50 years, but how does somebody buying a house know about that, right?
Okay, you know what, I'll look, why don't we?
Yeah.
Why don't I look into whether there is this, whether there, I know what you're
Okay.
getting
Yeah,
at,
yeah.
whether there is some other formal listing similar to the now, I'll take a look at it. I have a feeling that Westchester list may not exist anymore.
It exists, but they no longer are doing it.
They don't
okay.
update it anymore.
Okay, well, okay,
All right.
I'll look into that
Okay,
and
all
I'll
right.
send you
And
an
if
email.
you guys have a link or something and you wanna email it to me, I'll get it to Mary Ann. But I get the idea.
Well, yeah,
And I
right,
think to
and-
David's point, not asking for anything more than what we already have in place.
Yeah, I just don't want to remove.
And it has
what we
nothing
haven't.
to do
I
with the
understand, I just have
solar.
to figure out, as Mitchell said, I have to figure out how to define it. And
And
so,
you've been going along for quite a few years without redefining it.
understood,
And I
But-
don't think we've gotten into any trouble.
that is true, but this is a discussion about, in effect, what precipitated this, as I said at a prior meeting, what's happening to the ARB and what's happening to the review process itself. And since my personal opinion is I don't want to wipe the ARB out, because then I'll really be hearing, that you you are umbraged. So I'm trying to find ways to lighten the load slightly that doesn't really create a major problem. So if I can do that by defining the law in a certain way, that helps the process. We will get to a more in-depth review, I'll call it this, streamlining of the review process, but given that we've got a few other things that got in our way, I haven't been able to get to it yet, but it's coming.
I applaud any effort to do that as someone who is not a
Yes, I know. All right, so
in
you'll
this
be our,
town. I
yeah,
understand
first
that.
on the list for public comment.
Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, so,
I think somebody else wants to speak.
oh, I'm sorry, yep, come on up.
Paul Finkelar, Irvington Landmark Preservation. I understand this whole dialogue and the interest of going forward and lighting up the load on the ARB and all that, but I still feel it's real important to not go around the ARB and lighten off their load so much as you need to give them guidelines to streamline the process rather than going to the building department. Because there's still going to be a degree of aesthetics that need to be considered and still resolve the concern of people who want to get their solar panels on there. But just giving it to the building department, I think, is going and doing an end run around the ARB rather than giving the ARB, or we're asking them to come up with streamlined guidelines that'll make it easier for the process to happen.
And as I think it was Barbara who suggested, we should look at the solar regulations just to see how see what the interplay is with the historical buildings. So I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, so I'm assuming I have to make a motion to, no, I don't have to do
just
anything, I just have to
continue. Just
non-close it,
continue.
okay. I'm gonna learn it if we do this a few more times. Okay. All right, let's see what's up next.
And thank you to the DPW guys for patiently waiting.
Yes.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, now that I'm all worked up, come on up.
No, hold on.
Oh,
You
no,
have
sorry.
you have one fairly quick item.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Request to temporarily extend a special permit for adaptive reuse of an historic building at 45 West Clinton Avenue. Apparently, they have an open permit, and before we look at any kind of renewal that might modify the nature of their usage, we need to give them the time to close that permit. So how long are we extending this? Let's see. Till August
August
15th,
15th.
2024. So my motion is resolve to temporarily extend a special permit for adaptive reuse of an historic building, 45 West Clinton Avenue, until August 15, 2024. Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Now we got DPW.
Finally.
Come on up, guys. You want to make yourself comfortable?
What are you doing first?
I guess
Yeah,
DPW.
that's fine.
So it's DPW, water, and sewer.
Yes.
Maybe they should go first.
Yes, yeah. That's why I said that I appreciate it.
You're not doing too badly.
No.
Okay, would you like to do your
Sure.
summary? And do you want to break them up, or you want to do them all together? Your choice.
I think she's going to cover most of the DPW items first. The
Okay.
water and sewer got a little bit more in depth.
No problem.
Yeah. Okay, so as far as changes, so there's a lot of salary lines, and we did some allocations based on how much time the employees spend between street administration, snow removal, refuse, recycling. So some of the personnel salary lines look much larger than they actually are, and in addition to that, last year, the salary increases were in contingency and not on this line, so that also attributes to some of the salary increases. So I put a little blurb on the side. The actual increase from prior year in salaries is about 32,000. So those are all the highlighted personnel services lines. So then on the equipment line, there's just an increase of $50. So between that and what they currently had in the budget, they want to use that to purchase a new printer. And then the office supplies line, there's an increase of 200 for increases in supply costs and needs. For the central garage department, the overtime line is just increased by 3.5%, which is what's in the union contract for next year. There's 2,000 transferred between the supplies and equipment line, so that's just moving the funds. For the repairs of building costs, there's a 1,000 increase based on the historical cost of repairs needed. And on the equipment repairs line, there's a request for 7,250. And the reason for this is a one-time expense for a lift maintenance upgrade, which was identified when our insurance company came and did an inspection. The maintenance of vehicles line can be reduced by 250. The vehicle's new, so it doesn't have as many maintenance costs. And the uniforms line, it's an increase of 164 here, but between all of the uniform lines, we kind of consolidated a little bit. In total, it's an increase of 2,605, and that's also contractual based. In street administration, on the overtime line, this includes a 3.5% increase per the union contract, and then 5,000 was moved from the part-time labor line for the watering of Main Street, and 5,000 was moved from the professional fees line for drain pipe maintenance. So those will now be covered by the DPW employees. For the part-time labor line, there's a decrease of 56,564, and that's due to the 5,000 being moved to the line above, and the as-needed seasonal part-time line was reduced by 54,000. In addition, there is a request to increase the hourly rate for one of the part-time laborers from $22.55 an hour to $25 an hour. The sidewalk maintenance capital line, about 29,000 of this is due to replacing tree wells. So we just moved that into the shade tree supplies line.
And sorry, just so I understand that one. that's the cost of concrete and the metal framing that might go around it.
Includes everything.
We're on a mission to replace as many as we can, and I don't know how many.
There's a report here if they want to see it.
Okay, yeah, there's a rotation, kind of a plan going
Got it.
forward. We're trying to do about how many per year? If-
Roughly four per season. We have 8 on, we should have 8 on site now. If we get ahead of ourselves and we have some slow, if we have a slow week or two, we can do 1 a week. So it really just depends on what other maintenance we have going
And
on
you-
at the time.
In most cases, is it replacing the tree also, or you just?
You have to replace it.
Got
You
it.
have to cut the tree. And you have to move from that site as well. You can't plant where that previous tree was.
Got it, okay.
Sometimes the wells stay dormant for a period of time until it's proper to plant again.
Got it, yeah, having had to have trees removed in my yard, I know it'll burn the roots as they rot.
For the travel and education line, that line isn't used, so that can be reduced by $350. The professional fees, the reduction of $5,000 was just the movement to the overtime line. And utilities can be decreased by $5,000, and that's based on an analysis of our usage and the costs. So then snow removal, like the other overtime lines, we increased by 3.5%. And for equipment, there's a $10,000 one-time request for the purchase of a spreader. And the salt purchase line can be decreased by $10,000 based on the amount of salt that needs to be purchased.
Basically, right, and presumably you have stuff left over is that what this shows?
Just, I'm sorry, there was a line earlier that said capital budget. I thought the capital budget is something we don't talk about now.
It is, this is, I guess it used to be in the capital budget.
Right, so we made a decision, going back before even your time on the board, to take some of those capital items that we were borrowing for every single year and bring those and build them into the operating budget rather than incurring the borrowing costs. But if we're spending, $100,000 a year on paving every year, for example, rather than borrowing $100,000 each year, we would bring that into the operating budget.
And you've seen it with police cars too.
We did that as well, right, exactly.
It's
So-
every other one, right? It's one in the capital budget and one in the regular budget.
Exactly, but we always have one in the operating, so
Right,
there's
right.
always one purchase. But in the case of capital work, this is similar. This is includes some paving, but also includes about $120,000 worth of paving. And the balance of this line is curbs and sidewalks.
Sidewalks, catch
Catch
basins.
basins. So all types of infrastructure.
Gotcha. So it's just part of that process of moving stuff into the main budget.
Yes.
Okay, so refuse and collection. Overtime was increased by the 3.5%. This part-time labor line reflects current rates and the increase for the part-time laborer from 22.55 to 25. It's just one person. They're just allocated between several departments. That's why it keeps coming
So it's one
up.
full-time person?
One part-timer.
Okay.
The supplies line, there's an increase of 2,000, and that's based on current needs and pricing for pails and compost bags. Organic tipping fees can be decreased by 5,000 to be in line with the actual costs.
It's an organic tipping fee?
I'll describe that.
That's so we pick up yard waste weekly. That's the yard waste we pick up.
The cost to dispose of it.
Forgive me for a second, should we let Marion go?
Good question.
I don't have anything for afterwards.
And we have nothing after, so.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay,
Thanks.
that's all right.
I should have done that for you, but yeah.
Okay, there you go.
But maybe Marianne has something to add about the DPW.
That you can watch it at home and tell us.
Well, you're not gonna hear my report.
Oh,
No, I don't.
Okay. If you want to stay to give you a report, that's fine. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Tolls, there's an increase of 900, and that's just based on actual costs. Professional fees, there's an increase of 14,940, and that's,
So that's, when I think of professional fees, I'm thinking lawyers' accountants. So that looks like that's the cost of disposal of garbage?
Yes.
Okay.
yeah.
Weight times rate, got it, okay.
Fuel's an increase of 500, and that's reflective of oil costs and usage. Repairs of the building, there's 2,500 for electrical upgrades that are needed. Then we're in the recycling collection department. It's the same part-time labor increase I mentioned before. And then uniforms are all combined. And then in shade trees, it's the 29,000 increase that was moved from the capital line. It's not really capital. And the amount on that line is based on what it would cost to replace 4 tree wells per year.
Let me see if I can find my own notes. So somewhere there's a line for heating oil, and it looked like the actual was really low relative to the budget. I had.
They're very behind on billing us, so it's
Oh.
not,
That's the
so we're
wrong
missing
answer.
some bills, yes.
Okay.
How long has the person who you're seeking to give the raise to been with the department?
He's been with us close to
4 years.
to 2 to 3 years.
And he's never gotten a raise?
Honestly, somewhere along the line, our new hiree is making more than he is. And I'll take the blame for that. And we're just trying to catch up, and we want to retain him. He's full, he's 28-hour week. We treat him like a full-time employee, and it's really a need for us. It's retention more than anything.
Yeah, I wanted to get a picture of that. It makes a lot of sense.
That's the honesty of it.
It's a thoughtful answer. So many of the expenses are just part of the contract also. There's not a lot of our control, labor.
Sorry, I'm working my way through my own notes.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, what is CHIPS?
Go ahead, please.
What is CHIPS?
That's the New York State gives us funds for resurfacing highways, curbs, stuff like that.
And the way, so the way CHIPS is included in the budget, it's kind of like a reimbursable, I guess, grant from the state. So if the state ends up giving us more, then we usually increase the expense line to match how much the state will reimburse us, and then vice versa. If it's less, then we'll lower it. I know this year we got a little bit more than in the prior year, but there's talks that it won't be as much next year, but we don't really know what the amount will be yet.
And by the way, the CHIPS is Consolidated Highway Improvement something or other. I don't know. The rest of it is.
It's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I have the same question, so I Googled it to figure it out. 1.510.0123 labor. So there's a significant drop in what you're asking for. What am I missing? Or what are you missing?
Which line?
It is
5010, 123.
page 4.
Okay.
Yeah.
123.
10, 123.
Thank you, Larry. I was flailing when you said that.
Sorry.
I would like to say that
Yeah.
that's a testament to our crew.
I'm not, I'm fine with that. That's a good, that's a good answer, but I just want to make sure it's not something missing.
Todd and I got to hire a bunch of, I forget how many, but
Yeah.
we hired some really good people. And they're doing a great job. And we just don't need the summer help that we used to. We don't even get any summer help now. And the crew's doing such a good job that we feel we don't need this extra money that's just laying there.
Okay.
And you also have been very diligent about hiring replacement employees on the driver level, so you have more experienced, more capable employees. So
Great.
I have a question about sorry.
No, go
This-
ahead, jump in.
The snow overtime, it's just, I guess you just kind of have to do your best to forecast. I just was noticing, it seems like there's a large jump with like 94,000, then 30,000, then 97, and we've only spent 30,000, I guess. This year, I guess, we're just predicting that there'll be 3 times as much snow next year? Is that?
well, yeah, okay. Well, I'll quickly answer, and then I'm sure there's others. So you're absolutely right. There is no way to really forecast it. We had to simply look and try to predict. I don't want to say worst case scenario, but you also want to predict a higher than average year, because if you do get that worst case scenario, you don't want to be really behind on your budget. So.
Right.
Looking at the history, I mean, you can look at this and draw conclusions that, $30,000 is the right number, 31, 33 the last 2 years. But I think the year before that was 94,000. So, the last 2 years clearly have been a lot less than
Right.
we've been used to in the Northeast. But is that going to be the norm? I don't know. If you, I'm saying this rhetorically, if you all know the answer, tell us. But so we're trying to make those numbers consistent. Now, look, can you bring that number down by 5 or 10? Sure. But I don't know that that's the right answer either.
Yeah, I guess it's better to have the extra money just in case, and it's not like we spend it either if we don't need it. Yeah.
Unless, one way to look at it would be using fund balance for something like that, because it is one time, it's not recurring. Like, we don't get, those kind of crazy winters, but I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying
No,
it's just
it's a different approach.
Yeah,
absolutely. Listen, that's something you can take that approach. Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as going in, eyes wide open, what the possibility is.
That you're basically committing that money, because it could happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I got a question on 5010-435, which is travel and education, which is 0. I'm always a big fan of, getting people to do that stuff. I know you guys are busy and you may choose not to do it, but I don't want to take
Everything's on
anything away.
webinar now. Most stuff's on Zoom.
Oh.
I do most of it on Zoom. I just put in a
Me too.
reality. I just put in a voucher for $25 for a water webinar. But
Got
other
it.
than that, everything's usually free.
Got it. So there's nothing that's like an on-site thing where you go and watch somebody operate a piece of
No.
equipment or something.
And
Okay.
and a lot of the Cornell Road programs are just too far away. They're in Rochester. I mean,
Yep.
if some are close, I would be happy to go.
Got it.
But I haven't found much
Okay.
that's reasonable.
Well, if you do, let us know. I'm certainly amenable to something like that. Okay. Let's see.
One thing that happens to be on the screen now, and it's not terribly significant, but just to point out that the 5010-437 professional fees, there is a reduction, in that budget, but there's also a reallocation. We no longer have to have our consultant prepare an annual report for New York State. That's for those of you that have been through it. That's the report in May that discusses all of the things we do to help with stormwater management. It's a very standardized looking report that you remember.
It was presented, right?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. So that report no longer needs to be prepared and filed. So the consultant that we were using to prepare that report is no longer needed. So that's about a $3,000 to $4,000 expense that we were able to remove. But what we did add back is the fact that we are using an increasing amounts, we're using our grant writer on a more frequent basis to address all the grants that we've been talking about, even down to the food scraps grant, and which we got, by the way, as of today. So, but those types of things, we think it's an important investment of only $5,000 is what we predict, but we've been pretty successful.
Okay, 5010.474 EWR and Pave New York. So
That's part of CHIPS. It's just another, that's extreme weather recovery and POP, Pave New York, and then there's POP as well, which isn't on there. That was new last year. That just rolls into CHIPS.
And that's the same thing. We budget 0 in revenue for those items, and then when we find out what the amounts will be, we do a budget adjustment to increase this, and then the revenue line.
And we won't know that until New York State
Passes their budget.
Right.
yeah,
What happens is over the years, so the CHIPS number has been relatively constant. I mean, they fight over it every year in Albany, but the number that we get it doesn't fluctuate all that much. What they end up doing is they end up adding one-time new grants for specific things that may have happened in a particular year. There may have been a bad winter, and all of a sudden they have this extreme weather recovery program that they now issue extra money. It's like extra CHIPS money, which is fine. It's nice talking points, and the politicians love that, but we don't know if that program is going to continue from one year to the next. That's why we budget 0, and if it comes in, we spend it.
and it's always 20/20 hindsight because they're fixing the problem you already had, not the one you're about to have.
True, yeah, but we just don't know if the programs will continue. Where CHIPS is a constant program, so we're comfortable with that.
Got it. Okay. So, and maybe it's just, again, a function of the weather. This is 5142-101. Your actual to date in '23 is, $32,000, and your '24 requested is $100,000. This is just your best guess at what you think you're gonna be facing?
That was the line item we were talking about. We were talking about snow removal. We were talking about overtime. But it would be helpful to understand that you'll notice that the supplies line is fairly consistent in terms of our usage. And what I've come to understand is that it depends on the type of storm that you have. A storm of, a couple of inches of ice and snow can use up a tremendous.
It's actually more expensive than a storm that has 7 to 10 inches.
Right.
Because we're throwing more material down.
Yeah.
So there's not always, it's hard to predict that relationship as well. So there's a lot of guessing
Now,
going on.
second reason to hope for a lot of snow besides skiing, so.
Yeah, it's actually easier to
Not that
deal
I
with.
ski anymore, but. And you've already answered my question with the salt and the calcium chloride, so.
Bridge trolls.
Which one?
Oh, sorry.
That is, that's the sanitation vehicles we have to pay toll going to the transfer station. So that's daily.
Oh, the one in Yonkers.
The one in Yonkers.
It's actually not a bridge, but
It
was at one point, probably.
We pay does that come out of, Easy Pass comes out of all the vehicles for the village? I'm not sure, I'm not sure.
It
It's just
should
us?
only be yours, yeah.
Because the toll's right there.
Wait, you got it.
5182-200. There's no actual in '23, meaning did you have in storage already streetlight parts and bulbs and what you needed?
I'm finding it.
Yeah, that's all right. It took me a while to find it. It's page 8 of 12.
I know we
What
do.
number?
5182.
51, okay, so far, yes, well, there should be, actually,
I think there's a
there's a
2,500 open PO.
there's an open PO for $2,500, is it, just so you know, the street lights at Legend Holler, the heads are $2,500 a piece, so we talked about that at our little meeting.
Got it.
I just gave them the heads up of that. We'll go out and we'll go the normal street lights. We have some stock of them. We'll purchase more at the end of this season, hopefully that no other major ornamental lights break.
But they'll usually wait towards the end of the year
We wait.
to see how things are going, and then they'll replenish their stock.
Yep.
And the EV charging stations, that's the thing that we may start charging for, right? And that would help meet some of this budget, not for this next budget year, I guess, but after that, or?
No, for this upcoming one, we are going to be making a proposal that includes a revenue item of about $25,000, I believe it is.
So would that lower the $71,000 item?
No, that would stay in there, but you'll see the revenue side. We would put the gross expense on one side and then the
Oh,
revenue.
right,
on the
because they're
other.
still using the electricity, so it's
Right.
gonna be the same thing, but now we're getting money back for it.
Correct.
I guess in my closing comment on this is to compliment you again, probably for what Greg said before, because if I take, this is your grand total line, and just multiply it by 1.5, because I'm assuming that's about 8 months of, it would be over $100,000 higher than what you're showing for the budget going forward. Not that I'm encouraging you to ask for that either, but, and we may even ask for something back. I should have led with, we're not here to like take things away from you. We want to see what the whole budget looks like first and decide just how difficult we have to be when we get there. So this is more an educational process.
Because if we gave the budget that everyone asked for, we would be over the caps.
Correct. I think, I don't know if anybody else has any more questions, or we can switch to water. We
You
good?
can switch.
Is the public allowed to ask questions?
Well, technically, you can wait till the end it's not a public hearing, but there's public comment at the end.
There will be, when the budget is presented.
Yeah,
there will be-
in
there will
in
be
April, we have a public
comment, but
hearing.
This is the point at which they sort of get to talk to us. However, I'm not opening this up to public comment. What I'm suggesting is if you had a specific question you want to email it to me, I'll ask, if it's appropriate, I'll certainly ask it, and try to get an answer.
And then certainly when the budget is being debated, yeah, because the thing you're asking about may not even be there by the time we have the final proposed budget. Does that make sense?
Okay.
Well, it wouldn't be too late at that point. Sometimes earlier is easier.
It won't be, because we will get a draft budget. I've forgotten what the deadline is, but we get a draft budget and then sort of debate that, and there will be hearings. Okay, head for the hills unless you're hanging out for water and sewer. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you.
And Leola, there's public comment at the end. You can say anything you want.
That's true.
That's okay, but a lot of it was a compliment, and I knew they'd be out of here by the
Oh.
time.
Well, you can give them a compliment if you want.
Right to them.
You didn't tell us that.
Right, you didn't tell
You
us
should have
that.
said that.
Thank you.
I make a motion, we allow Leola to say something.
That's fine.
All right.
Okay, tell me about what, you're gonna break water and sewer into two, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll treat those separately.
Okay.
And even the way I'm presenting this one is a little bit different than the other one. So the water fund is basically funded by the water rates.
Yep.
And so all the personnel expenses, health insurance, retirement, all fringe benefits, there's even band principal and interest, which all gets recorded in this fund. So as far as increases go, it's mainly, general liability insurance, unused sick and sick benefits, longevity payments, retirement, workers' comp, health insurance, and then the cost of borrowing. So what we did first is looked at a projection of where we will end up at the end of this year, which we're projecting to be about 234,940. Now, 137.
That's a loss.
That's a loss, yes. About 137,000 of this was fund balance that we appropriated last year. So that was a planned loss. And the remaining deficit is just due to how much rain we got this year, and usage hasn't been
Just so
nearly
I'm-
as high.
Just so I'm clear, you took, when you say you appropriated fund balance, you took water fund balance to use to pay for something in this fund.
Yes.
Yeah, we had, in last year's budget, we had a new debt service that was imposed upon us from the town of Greenberg. It was a project that actually was completed, and whatever the reason was, they never charged us for our portion of the debt service. It was a joint project on the Rumber pump station, I believe.
Yep.
So.
That was my first tenure.
That was, yeah. This isn't
Deal with that.
quite the same, but.
I get it, yeah.
But it ended up being a, let's say, for round numbers, $250,000 hit on this fund in last year's budget. So what the board decided to do was offset, I think it was probably about half, offset a portion of that debt service with the use of fund balance, which all would have been a pretty solid plan, except for the low water usage that we had last summer, which really drives our operations.
Yeah.
So that led to an even higher loss than we thought.
And low water use, did we have a lot of rain last summer?
Yeah, so our usage was down. I mean, I don't know if you have the statistics.
I don't
in front
have
of you.
the
Millions of
statistics,
gallons, but yeah.
it's,
Wow.
it was quite a bit, because like during the summertime, springtime, most of our usage is sprinkler systems. So lack of rain, a lot of rain,
Yeah.
have moisture sensors on their
Shut them
system.
off.
They don't turn on. I mean, some people do water them in the rain.
Yeah.
But a majority of people, when we talk to them, we tell them about the moisture sensor, conserve water, so hence less sprinkling.
So the relationship there is, I mean, if you think about it from a business standpoint, there's a significant amount of fixed cost embedded in this budget. And then there's certainly plenty of variable costs, like the cost of the water and the cost of the electricity to pump the water. But when there's low usage, you don't make up for your fixed costs in your rates the way you normally would.
Yeah.
So I'm sure we're going to dive into it more deeply, but I'm happy to, we'll talk about it further. But you need to understand the relationship.
Got
So.
it.
I mean, that's pretty much what I have as far as that. I mean, the three big expenses related to our purchase of the water are the New York City excess charges, the purchase of water from Greenberg, and the Rumbrook pump station.
So what we did is we took a look at the amount of revenue that our rates generate, compared that to the amount of usage and the amount of expense that was flowing through the Rumbrook pump station, which were billed by Greenberg. And we know that last year was a down year. We know that in an extremely dry summer, when there's a high level of usage, we have a surplus. So we're pretty confident, again, looking at all the relationships of the past few years, that we have a rate structure that is budgeted for an average year. And if there's an average year, we're going to break even. I mean, that's what our, that's what our goal is all the time. But this year was not an average year; it was a down year. So that, and then leading up to this also is that you have increases in some of your variable costs, like the cost of water purchase from New York City. I don't even know what we're assuming. I don't recall what we're assuming for a rate increase from New York, but New York's been having
About 4%.
4% increase, yeah.
Yeah.
So there's increases there. Of course, electric's been up and down, but it's pretty constant right now. And then there's And then there's obviously salary and benefits that flow through the Rumper Pump Station as well, because we pay for a portion of the staffing of that station. So all of that, led us back to what our estimates are for revenue, which we kind of, in a sense, we kind of back into it in terms of our rates. So we go through and we try to figure out what our expenses are going to look like running through the Rumper Pump Station on an average year, what our other fixed costs are, which Katie just outlined, and then we look and see what our gap is on our revenue. What would our revenue have been if this was an average year? And I think our assumption starting point was 2.6 million was the average.
Yeah.
Was the average year is what we would have expected. But 2.6 million is not going to be enough to run this fund, and that's where the rate increase comes. It's just off the screen.
8%.
Not by design, but 8%.
Yeah. How does that compare to the last couple of years?
That's high. Yeah, it's high.
So last
Bring it down
year.
last year by the fund balance, right?
We brought it down with using
Yes.
fund balance, and we're now taking the next step of going from using 137,000 of fund balance plus. We're bringing that down in half basically, because we're trying to wean ourselves off of it. We can't keep using that every year. And in fact, what's we have basically a flat zero.
It would likely lead to a deficit of about 53,000.
So we don't even have a surplus left
Yeah.
after this year.
Yeah.
No, it's not the end of the world. I mean, I think if you remember the history of this fund, well, you remember more of the history than you need to.
Yeah, you
but-
had a negative
but it's-
balance in the millions.
Right, but it's only within the last couple of years that we were able to bring the fund balance down to the point where it was pretty close to being, it was still a deficit.
Yeah.
But it was pretty close to being zero. And then we took money from the general fund and reconstituted it. And we started it off with about a $200,000 fund balance, which we just burned through.
Yeah, I mean,
So it's
but-
going to
but-
need to be reconstituted somewhat.
yeah,
from the
you're gonna have
general
to
fund.
tweak it every year, but you're
Until
at
we
least
get on
close
more-
to break even.
Yeah.
Or
Just-
trying to be.
$200,000 is not enough for a fund like this that has such variable operations.
Yeah.
$200,000 is less than 10% of fund balance. I mean, our general fund has over
Yeah.
30%, as you know, so.
So will this 8% build a little bit up, or are we gonna be scooping out of the general fund again?
We're gonna be pulling from the general fund. We're not making that recommendation tonight,
Okay.
but before the end of the fiscal year, we'll refine the projections and then bring to you a request to bring money over to supplement this fund and provide it with a fund balance.
Wait, before the 23-24 fiscal year is over?
Yes.
But for the 24-25 budget?
Right.
What kind of fund balance were you projecting that we would take from the general fund?
It would be, so the 69,000 of appropriated fund balance, the transfer in that we would do this year would kind of make up for that. And then the 8% would be like a break even for next year.
So if we wanted to bring that rate down, we'd have to bring in more than 68,000, which is getting almost to what we did last year. Do you think that we should wean down from
Well, again, the normal routine is to wean off of the use of fund balance.
Right.
Yeah.
But if 8% is difficult, you can use your general fund to help supplement it.
Yeah.
But that's a decision you can make.
Yeah,
You don't
I
have to
would
make it
only
tonight.
use
but-
general fund just to deal with the unusual variations that you didn't foresee.
Right.
And that's based on my previous experience of showing up and saying, how can this be? That we're millions of dollars in the hole. And the obvious issue here is you're making a choice. If you pull from the general fund, you're basically saying to taxpayers, pay for the people who use water.
Yeah.
So you don't want to be doing that because
Right, not on
you
a
create the
regular
wrong
basis, right.
incentives.
Mhm.
Right.
It's one thing to pull a little bit to top it off.
Yeah.
It's another to consistently underprice your water and end up with the taxpayers paying.
Yeah.
I'm gonna water my lawn all summer long because I get a cheap rate.
Right. I meant more
Yeah.
just what our choices were. I wasn't thinking the
Sorry.
assumption of what we should
Yeah,
do.
I know, I got it.
There was years in
Yeah,
the
speaking-
past where
Oh.
we actually did a 0 rate increase for a couple years because the fund was doing so well,
And then you fall behind.
but then we fall behind. So my personal opinion is is that we should never do a zero. You have to keep up with inflation, at least
Yeah.
2% rate increase. So we cut off an 8% increase. Because great, we saved in the past, but now going forward, we're having these big rate increases.
Can you tell during the course of the year if you're having the kind of a year where you didn't need the full 8% and you could tweak it then? Because I know in past years, we've adjusted more than once in a year. I don't want
Yeah, it doesn't happen often, but I mean, I think if you look at it in the middle of the fall, you'll have a pretty good picture of how your year is going to go.
Okay.
Because the summer really drives everything.
Yeah.
Is it perfect? No, it's not perfect. You know?
Got it.
Can you explain more like how the billing works with like do we charge people more that are using like above the average usage? I wonder like
Yes.
how that rate increase is split out, if maybe we should be charging people who use way too much water more versus like the average person just using, you know, a normal amount of water or whatever it is. Yeah.
They actually are. There's an excess rate. Once you go above 100 units, you pay approximately 2.5 times the normal rate. So there is basically a penalty built into people that use, you know, more than average, because our water usage is based off of our population, which is basically we're allotted 23 million a month. So anytime that we go over that, we pay an excess charge. So our rates are structured so that we're covering that with the 2.5.
With our billing rate. So what actually is interesting about this is that, you know, we buy the water wholesale from New York City. And as Jim said, they only allot us a certain amount per month. And it can vary from month to month. It depends on the time of year. But when we go over that amount, they charge us the regular residential retail rate for water. So it's a much higher rate for water. And so we have pretty significant excess charges when a community like ours that has a lot of lawns and outdoor usage, when people use water on an excess basis. So our rates, as Jim said, are structured to try to capture that. And they're pretty successful at doing that. When they're not successful is when we don't have a lot of usage. That's what happened this past year. But you can't, because you can't make up for those fixed costs.
Right. And with the rate increase, like we're gonna tell them what the rate is in June for the next year. So I don't really see how we can go back on the rate increase per se.
I mean, they can honestly, they can set the rate at any point they want. I mean, you know what I mean? They can increase it halfway through the year, decrease it.
Yeah, and I'm not proposing we have to do it. I was just saying that if you decide, hey, we're having a really flush year because people are using a lot of water or something, you know, then you can reconsider it, that's all.
Well, I mean, it might be,
correct.
I mean, it might be semantics, but maybe there's something to it that maybe you have, you settle on a base rate here, whatever that increase might be, 3 or 4% maybe, or it might even be as high as 5%. But and then you segment off that other item and call it a surcharge.
Right.
I realize it's the same thing. It's no different than FedEx charging you a gasoline charge on your FedEx package. You know, I mean, it's to say I am not trying to, but it might give you the ability to then pull that,
drop the surcharge
in the future if conditions warrant.
All right.
I don't know. It's something we can talk about.
I mean,
but
I'm
there are options.
okay with the 8%. I understand it's a big jump, but it's people are using water and they have, most people have some ability to control the amount of water they use, you know, within reason. And it creates an incentive to move one direction or another.
Usually when they get their first excess bill, they change their habits quite a bit, because it's quite shocking.
It's a big penalty. 2.5 times is a huge increase. Yeah.
And do we still, we still send out, I know I get my stuff electronically now, but something that says, hey, here's how the rate is charged. I guess it's on the bill to some extent.
Annual water quality report gets sent out
That has that.
every year, and it lists the rates, you know, excess in the village, outside the village, because there's a different rate for people who live on Mountain Road than there is for people that live within the village, because we purchase basically Greenberg purchases water from us, or we purchase water from Greenberg for Mountain Road, so.
Okay. I do actually read it, I just don't remember the rate description. I'm always looking at the water quality and content.
And Katie was just saying that they also, when the board does settle on a change in rates, that the back of the bill, there's a notice related to that as the billing periods are coming
Yep.
up. I mean, whether someone looks at it or not, it's a different issue, but it's there.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find my own.
So the Rumber pump station, everything, all the water we get comes through there, or no?
Pretty much, once in a while, we get it from the Knollwood pump station, which is the Delaware, when the Rumbrook is down. So, we actually have two sources we can pull from, but it's probably 95% of the time is at a Rumbrook.
Because it's cheaper from there than if we pull it from the Delaware?
No, they just did that project and gave us capability for them to send water from Knollwood, which is the Delaware station, to the Catskill station.
So Greenberg built an
So
interconnection.
Yeah, Greenberg eventually built it into that. Prior to that, they would take water from Knollwood, send it to a tank, and then they would backfeed us off their tank. So now it's a direct connection.
But most of the time, the water is coming from the Catskill
96% of the time, Rumbrook.
I think it's 8.1990. This is more salary. What's going on with you got zeros in the 23 actual, what did you may have explained this.
Contingency.
Yeah.
So contingency will never have like an actual expense. Whenever we use contingency, the money gets moved from contingency to whatever line the expense is on.
So it might be if you were having a negotiation or something and you set money
Yes,
aside.
so
Okay.
it would have been the
Got
CSEA
it.
contract that was in
Okay.
there.
And then 9950, just explain to me, you may have already explained to me, but not attached to these numbers, transfer to debt service.
That's to pay for the serial bonds. So this is money that gets moved to the debt service fund, and then the debt service fund pays
For
the
borrowing
bond
that was allocated to
principal.
water.
Only to water.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll see as part of the capital budget that we have each project identified as either water or non-water, because we have to break it out statutorily. We have to break out the debt and only assign the debt for water projects to this fund only.
Got it.
And that's how we do it.
And this is a bit of a non sequitur, but the capital project that I've heard discussed is that pulling out I think it's old water equipment on the sawmill, that's gonna be part of the capital budget.
So that project was borrowed for once.
Oh.
It's really undetermined whether that is going to be enough to do it. I don't think it is, based upon the difficulty that we're having getting there.
Yes.
Location, remember.
Yeah. So the answer to your question is yes and no. It was previously done, but I think we have to revisit it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have anybody else have any more questions on water?
Right, harder to, you know.
It's kind of an educated guess, the usage, so.
Yeah.
And the things are what they are, you know what I mean? It's like, it's not like a rec program, whether you're gonna do it or not, you know, it's like.
You want to tell me about the sewer fund then?
Yes.
Actually, before you even start, let me tell everybody else, since I asked the question.
Oh, yeah.
So that if 8% was a shocker, this is going to be a 26% rate increase, but you should be aware that the impact on an average home is $42. So, so take a deep breath and
make it 52%.
Yeah, the sewer rates are, it's 55 cents for up to 100 units, and over 100 units, it's $1.44. So based on a usage of about 250 to 300 units, it would be about $40 more a year.
Okay, now you can go through it.
Starting our hearts again.
So, I mean, this fund is pretty, there's not too much going on other than the fixed costs that are recorded here. There is the East Irvington Sewer District agreement, which Greenberg pays us about 10% of our sewer employees' fees. That gets recorded there, and then the rest of the fund is funded by the sewer rents, and any increases here are due to insurance, taxes.
Can I ask a question? It says East Irvington Sewer District pending signed Greenberg agreement. Does that mean they haven't signed it? And I have to make a phone call?
Well, I don't think you need to do that yet, but,
Okay.
but we have had an agreement. In fact, I think it was a 10-year, 5-year agreement that we had that expired in 2021, and we've been requesting a new contract from them.
Basically living by what the terms of that was.
Well, and the thing is it's sewage that's collected in the unincorporated section of Greenberg called East Irvington that passes into our sewer pipes.
Yep.
So we couldn't stop it if we wanted to.
No, I get it.
I mean, it's gonna continue to happen.
Yeah,
So
full East Irvington Mountain Road.
right. So, but they pay us for that, and
They
will.
are paying at least,
Yeah.
even if they haven't signed it. Okay.
So, and they haven't paid us new amounts. They've paid us up to 2021. So we've accrued what's owed to us, and we just have to get the paperwork.
Got it. I think it was the fire department that I had to deal with last time that they hadn't signed the intermunicipal agreement. Okay.
Yeah, that
Wait,
one.
so at some point a big check is coming from Greenberg, is that what
Yeah,
you're
I
saying?
mean, it's not that big, but it's, yes.
Because it's the sewer, yeah.
Yeah, but we've already accounted for the anticipated revenues, so it's not like we're gonna see a benefit to the fund.
Got it. Go ahead, sorry.
So our projection for this year is that, so we ended last year with a fund balance remaining of $1,704, but there was $10,118 appropriated of fund balance. And last year, the usage rates didn't come in as high as the budget. So that's kind of been
And do you
the
see that there's
case.
a correlation with the water
Well, we
usage?
base our sewer off the water.
Oh, so it's just a
Water
straight
usage.
numeric
Everyone,
calculation, okay.
right, everyone's billed based upon their water usage, because we don't meter sewage,
Okay,
as you can
got it.
imagine.
Yeah,
So the idea is whatever comes in goes out,
okay.
at least that's the theory. And the only people who aren't billed sewer rates are those that have septics. We
Yeah.
still have a few. That's why we break it out.
Yeah, so, I mean, historically, it's been budgeted too high, which is why the fund balance kind of, was lowering. So we think this projection, and a transfer in from general fund, along with the 26% increase, could bring us to a break-even point.
Back in balance.
I don't really have any questions on this one. I don't know if anybody else does.
No, I think we just have to say, you might have to lead with that's an average of $42.
Yes, the
I think
26%
The
is
26%
scary.
is.
It's a scary
yeah.
number, but the sewer is,
Is
it's
low.
like, what was it, 45 cents?
It's a very small component.
Uh,
of the bill.
55 cents, yeah.
Compared to,
Yeah.
like a 26% water increase would be,
Astronomical.
astronomical.
Yeah, you'd have I think you'd have an appreciable reduction in water usage if you did. Okay. Just sort of out of curiosity, does the flow rate for both water and sewer actually impact the infrastructure? In other words, when you're when you have a very high year where people are using a lot of water? Or is it more just the freezing and thawing?
Freezing and thawing is the
Yeah.
big thing. Like this year was pretty light as far as water main breaks. We had about 3 more service line breaks, which are more the homeowner's problem.
Yeah,
But we still have to go out and do a lot of groundwork to determine that. So we're rated for 4.4 million gallons a day, and the highest since I've been here was 2.2 million. So we have a lot of room.
and this is more for my education than it is a budget question. Do we proactively do we have the capability of proactively looking for leaks? Since that's
That's
are
a
you
great
about to ask me
question.
for capital expenditure? I shouldn't have asked that
Actually,
question.
in the spring, we're gonna be doing, well, in the next month or two, we will be doing I'm hiring a company to do a leak survey of the whole village. We try and do that about every 5 years.
Yep.
Also, I'm getting our pay meter at the 9A, the Sawmill River Pit where we get our water from.
Yeah.
I'm getting that meter tested again. So, we're proactive, look for leaks.
Yep.
One way that you do that is you go around and listen on your fire hydrants, so guys do that. We have a listening device, so we're proactive as far as leaks.
Got it. Great.
Yeah, and they'll come out. I mean, we've had places where people have observed water running when
I
they
did.
think it didn't think it should be, and they'll come out and test it, and if they see chlorine in it, then they know that
Chloride, right?
chloride or is
Yeah.
that?
Well, usually we test chlorine first, and then if we can't find chlorine, we use fluoride because that's not naturally occurring.
Yeah,
And we know that it comes in at 0.80. So if we get something that's like a 0.6 or 0.7, we know it's potable water. And then we break out our listening devices and try and narrow it down.
Got it.
So we're not digging holes all over the place.
A lot of times it comes back with nothing, and it's just groundwater.
Yeah, I mean,
But
I've had
people don't
have
believe
springs
it.
in
Yeah.
my yard, and
Especially
I've called you out
over
for
this
that.
year with a lot of the rain that we had a lot of people calling. I have a stream running in my house, so I'll go down there and we'll test it and listen, and usually it's groundwater, so.
So it is a stream. Okay, great. Anybody else have questions on these items? No? Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry you had to go last.
That's all good. It's all good. See you guys in the morning.
Okay,
See it.
all right. Any public comment? Is there anybody online?
No, you lost everyone.
Okay, not exciting, huh?
Sorry.
Okay.
Well, like I said-
Actually, I skipped over reports of board standing committees and officers. Trustee liaison reports. Anybody have anything they want to?
I have some stuff from the Green Policy Task Force. So, they have, on March 6th at 7, they have a Irvington Climate Action Plan workshop at the Irvington Public Library. And they wanted to mention the Broadway for Everyone workshop Thursday, March 7th from 6 to 8 at the Terrytown Recreation Center.
It's the senior center. I was gonna announce that too.
Oh,
It's the
okay.
Route 9 thing, yeah.
Oh, yeah, the Route 9 thing, yeah.
You're not wrong, it is, but people know it as the senior center. We were told to tell people the senior center.
Okay. And the mayor's monarch pledge, which maybe you want to talk about.
Yeah, well, we're doing it.
We're doing it,
It's
okay.
done.
And then Saturday, March 16th, from 10 to 12, with a rain date of March 17th, the 2024 spring cleanup on the Old Croton Aqueduct. And I just would encourage people to look on irvingtongreen.org, because everything is also on there, more details and easier to follow.
Want to go next, Mitch?
Sure, just quickly, don't forget, Sunday, March, wait, I have the calendar here. Sunday, March 10th, 2 o'clock at Mercy College is the Irvington Theater presenting the play reading series. It's a great thing. These are unproduced plays, so no one's ever heard them before, so you can sit and watch actors read them, and then online through the 16th, you can watch them. And as Arlene said, it's really important to get Irvington people out on the 7th, March 7th, which is a Thursday at 6 o'clock for the Route 9. It's the New York State's going to be presenting what they think, and they're going to be getting comments from us as to what we want. So it's good to have a good Irvington turnout.
Okay, and Larry O'Grady.
No report for tonight.
Okay. Larry, Lucky?
No report.
Okay. All right, I never do this, but review of action items. I think the only item was really just what Mary Ann can find to try to better define the historical properties, and we'll see what she finds.
Right. And also I think a question was raised about making sure the solar guidelines were appropriate for historic buildings.
historic
That's
district,
something
yeah,
was
yeah.
requested.
I didn't want to list something that was my assignment, so. All right, I will take a motion to adjourn. Or, yes, I'll
Second.
make a motion to
Second.
adjourn. How's that sound? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Take care, guys.
Thanks. Night, have a good night.
Right.
Good night.